Good morning, Delaware. It's another great morning here in Delaware. Can't believe we're already well into July. My birthday's gone, and the whole thing is just kind of shot. But hey, what the heck? It's going to be a great month, and still got some great fun coming up in the Summer Reading Club, including Jasmine Varga, who is our guest today on the radio show. She'll be speaking at the library. We'll talk more about her speaking engagement in the second half of the show. But how you doing, Nicole?
I'm doing really great.
Great.
I'm enjoying summer. I'm not happy that you reminded me that it is like halfway gone already, but
well, that's my job, right?
I know. It is a good reminder if you are participating in our summer reading club. Everything kind of wraps up on the 23rd, so I would make sure that you get your 12 hours read, get your on-demand videos watched, and that you come in and get your prizes.
We also have a big announcement from the Friends of the Library, which if you were listening to last week's show, you already know about, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then next week, Karen Cowan will be on the show to talk about what they're doing with their new book drop-off. So anyway, Jasmine Varga, Varga, welcome to the show. Sorry about that. I used to know somebody named Lou Varga, and so I just tripped over it. So anyway, it's great to have you on the show here. We're delighted to welcome you to the library shortly, but let's talk a little bit about what we're reading now. So Nicole, what are you reading, listening to, binging on, whatever?
Well, I stumbled down the path of choose your own adventure books that are in a picture book style that are also kind of a little bit helpful in nature for dealing with emotions.
I could use that.
Sometimes these books are not great.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes these books are written by a psychologist and they have way too many words on the page, and it's just muddled down in all of the different things that the book is trying to get across. These ones are not. They're actually kind of good. It's called You're Angry, Throw a Fit or Talk It Out. You Choose the Ending by Connie Colwell Miller. There's another one that I read that's called You Can Stay in Control, Wild or Calm. You Choose the Ending by Connie Colwell Miller. They are really, really, really simple. And, it's funny because, I'm trying to help my daughter with some emotional control. And we get to the very first page, and it's something that happens in our house almost every day. It's the end of the day. It's a beautiful summer day. Kids are playing outside, and we step outside and we say, it's time to come inside. And so then the option is, in this book, the girl Kendra, she can stomp her feet, or she can talk with her dad. And it's funny because I walk through this with my daughter, and I'm like, what does she do? What would you do? Would you stomp your feet, or would you go talk to dad? And she's like, well, I'd stomp my feet. And I was like, well, that's great. So then, you turn the page, you go to the proper page, and she stomps her feet, and she's angry, and she yells, I don't want to go to bed. And the dad says, okay, you're coming inside. Come now, please. And so you get another choice. Is she going to whine and cry, or is she going to go to the door? And then you see what path each of those decisions takes her down. And, of course, the more resistant she is, the less she gets to maintain in what she wants the outcome to be, which is ultimately more playtime. And the more compliant she is, if she would have chosen to talk with her dad right away, she would have said, Dad, actually, I was right in the middle of a game. I just want to have my chance to be it. And then can I come in? And Dad says, oh, that's reasonable. Yes, you may have your chance to be it, and then you may come in. But if she throws a fit, not only does she, come inside immediately, and then she goes to bed, and then she loses time tomorrow. So it really does show how actions have consequences, and how better choices lead to, the more desirable outcome. And it's written in really understandable language, and I'm just shocked that it's not awful. I mean, I've tried so many of these, children emotional control books, and they're all written by psychologists, and they're all really terrible. And this one
they're like those after-school specials when I was young.
Yeah.
On TV that were just so over the top and so obvious that you just wanted to scream.
This one was pleasantly wonderful. Yeah.
Good.
So it's You Choose the Ending. I would just look up Connie Colwell Miller, but it's always going to be like You're Angry, Throw a Fit or Talk It Out. You Can Stay in Control, Be Wild or Calm, and there's several in this series. So I think that you'll enjoy it if you want to help your kid, use some emotional coping mechanisms.
They have one that says you're frustrated, calmly plot the assassination of the person you're mad at.
Right, exactly. Or shove it deep, deep down.
Shove it deep, deep down and have it come out 6 months later.
Yeah, right. I haven't seen that one yet.
That's the story of my first marriage. Okay. Wow, that took me down a rabbit hole I wasn't expecting.
Maybe you need one of these, George.
Maybe I need all of them. Okay. As I mentioned, our guest is Jasmine Varga. And so what are you reading or listening to or binging on right now, Jasmine?
Yeah, hi. Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you. And in our house, I'll do watching first because we've been watching on repeat the In the Heights movie adaptation of the musical.
Oh, wonderful.
My daughters are obsessed. The soundtrack is on repeat in our house, and everyone's just singing the songs. It's been a really fun, joyful summer soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then I've been reading aloud to them. We just finished. It's a starter of a new chapter book series by Erin Entrada Kelly, who this is her first foray into for younger readers. She writes a lot of really brilliant middle grade novels. But this one is called Maybe Marisol, Rainey, and it is about a young girl named Marisol who's pretty anxious, and she's afraid to climb the tree in her backyard. And it kind of reminds me of the book that you were talking about, and I think it's so well done and really speaking to kids about where they're at with their emotions, because Marisol feels a little bit different from the rest of her classmates who she perceives as being more fearless. But it was a really sweet story, and both of my kids, who are 4 and 5, really enjoyed it. And then I am reading myself A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. I think that's the correct title. I always mess it up. It's by George Saunders, who is, I think, primarily known as a short story writer, but it's actually a nonfiction book about the craft of writing, but it's also kind of like literary criticism, because he goes through some famous Russian short stories that he thinks are kind of like the exemplar of the short story form, and then dissects why he thinks they work. And it's been really interesting for me to read on a craft level, and I'm starting this new adventure I'm going to be teaching this summer for the first time.
Wow.
In an MFA program. And so I'm trying to beef up my vocabulary for talking about writing craft things, but it's been one of the more enjoyable craft books I've read, because I feel like he has a really approachable voice, and it's also been fun because I wasn't familiar with a lot of the material that he's kind of analyzing. So you get those breaks of you read the short story, and then he goes through kind of what the different elements he thinks are at play.
That's fun.
Wasn't he the guy who wrote Lincoln at the Bardo? That was so...
Yes, yeah.
Wow, I tried starting that 3 different times and could not get into it. It was just me, I know, because it was so popular, but for some reason, I couldn't cross that line for some reason. So anyway, I did actually, though, read a serious novel this week.
That's good.
Which is not my usual forte. I'm usually a nonfiction kind of guy, but I saw this and I just had to read it. This is Hamnet, a novel of the plague by Maggie O'Farrell.
I have had my eye on that one for quite some time, and I'm very excited to hear this.
It is excellent. It was published last July, 2020. And Maggie O'Farrell, who was born in Northern Ireland, grew up in Wales and Scotland. This is, I believe, her 8th novel. It was a New York Times bestseller. It was the winner of the National Book Critics Circle Award. And I can see why. It is an amazing novel. If you know anything about the life of William Shakespeare, his only son was named Hamnet, Hamnet. He also had 2 daughters. They lived. The family lived in Stratford while Shakespeare worked in London with the King's Players. And this is the story of his family that was left back in Stratford. In fact, Shakespeare is never named in this book, and last names are not really used in this book at all. It's all. But how many Hamnets are there that lived in Stratford in the late 1500s and were the grandson of a glove maker and had a father who lived off in London writing for theater?
Right.
So it's not hard to figure it out. It's not really a roman à clef or anything like that. But this is it's fascinating. The novel is set almost exclusively in Stratford. It focuses on how Hamnet came to be infected with the plague. And then the novel moves along in time. It moves around in time. It's not a straight linear story. There's parts of it about Shakespeare's childhood with his kind of shady, abusive glovemaker father. It jumps into his wife's life. We've always called her Anne Hathaway. According to this author, the few documents that are left from there, her father called her Agnes. And so she refers to her as Agnes throughout the book. And it also talks about Agnes's life. She loved her mother very much. Her mother died when she was very young, and her father remarried, and her stepmother was just atrocious. Agnes has powers. She can tell things by touching your hand.
There's magical realism in this book?
There's magical realism in this book.
Oh,
I know how much you love that.
You just hooked me.
So, and it goes through the courtship of Will and Agnes, through the birth of the children, through Hamnet's untimely death, and then wraps up with kind of how the family recovers. And Shakespeare writes a play called Hamlet, which makes Agnes, who is deeply, deeply, deeply in her grief and can't get out, makes her furious because she thinks that he's written about the son. And so she finds her way to London and sees the play and realizes it's not at all about the son, but it's a tribute to him because it's kind of worked his name into the show. It is a beautifully written story. The characters are so well drawn, and yet they feel like they belong in their time. It's not like they transplanted 21st century people into 16th century garb. It's not a Renaissance fair. You feel this. You feel the community. You feel the smells. You feel as you walk down the mud or brick streets. It is so well written and so well thought out that it's a totally immersive experience. And so I can't recommend it highly enough. It's called Hamnet, a novel of the plague. I got it through Hoopla, which means it's always available on our electronic books. And it will definitely pay great dividends on a reading. So in fact, I'm thinking of going back and reading it again to see how she set everything up. Because it is so well done. Or maybe what I'll do is next time I have a nice long car ride, I'll listen to the audiobook.
Is that one on Hoopla too?
I think so,
Oh,
yes.
nice.
So
Very
it's
exciting.
well worth the time. So we're going to take a break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Jasmine Varga about her previous book, which has just been selected for it was a Choose to Read Ohio selection. Now it's going to be for the Great Reads from Great Places section of the Library of Congress's National Book Festival. That one's Other Words for Home, and also talk about her newest novel, which is called The Shape of Thunder. So we'll be right back, so stay tuned. And welcome back to Off the Shelf. We're here today with Jasmine Varga, the author of Other Words for Home and The Shape of Thunder, her newest book. And Jasmine's going to be doing an online program as part of our summer reading festival. And this is this will be on Monday, July 12th at 3:00 on Zoom. And so we are delighted to have you here both today and next Monday for the library. So welcome, Jasmine.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here too.
I feel like I can't welcome you to Ohio because unlike me, you're an Ohio native. Yeah, but living in Chicago area now. But your book that I just finished reading and absolutely can't say enough good things about, Other Words for Home, is set in Cincinnati and in Syria. And oh man, it's in blank verse. Is that a fair way of describing it?
Yeah, it's in free verse. So
Free verse.
It's definitely poems that don't follow a particular like syllabic structure.
But the language is amazingly poetic in so many different ways. I did something that I almost never do when I'm reading a book, and that is I wrote down quotes from the book that I just loved so much. And I don't want to get into a lot of them because I don't want to steal your thunder. I wanted you to talk about your books, but
I found myself doing the same thing.
I think what I'll have to do is one of these days I'll have to review this book on the show so I can use these quotes when I'm not, so I won't feel like I'm embarrassing myself in front of the author. But so tell us a little bit about how you came to be a writer. You deal with some pretty heavy topics for teens, young teens and teens. Tell us a little bit about how you got interested in the topics that you write about.
Yeah, so I feel like I have been a storyteller my whole life. I think that this experience that I'm about to describe may be common amongst kids with immigrant parents or first-generation kids, in that for a long time in my house, before we were able to, so my father's from Jordan, and before we were able to go and actually visit Jordan, the way that I came to understand the place that my father had been born and raised was through stories. And some of my earliest childhood memories are when my paternal grandparents came to Cincinnati, which is where I'm from, to visit us and told me stories about Jordan, and also sort of just like mythology type stories sort of a way for me to understand this side of my cultural identity. And then I was also a very shy and kind of insecure kid. But I learned that through writing, through telling stories, I felt more confident in expressing kind of questions and observations I had about the world, and that I could kind of hide bits and pieces of myself in stories. I could hide those questions or those observations and express myself in this way. And so it was in first grade, we did an activity called Author's Night, and that was where I was given the word author, and I seized onto that. And so for a long time, I would say I wanted to be a doctor and an author, which I think gets back to that common experience of first-generation kids.
Right, of course,
and somewhere along the way, I dropped the doctor part, and so here we are with the author part. But I'm like so delighted that it happened, because it's all I've ever wanted to do is write and tell stories. And I think in lots of ways, I'm a reader before I'm a writer. I think of writing as being in conversation with other stories and other books. And I guess maybe that gets at why I write about the topics that I write, because when I was a young person, I was really drawn to books that asked difficult questions of their reader. I felt really empowered by those books that challenged me when I was a young person to think about our world and some of the trickier parts of it. And so I love the concept of books as conversation starters, and I think they can really help broker conversations, especially for young people, and especially between young people and the grown-ups in their life. And that's kind of how I like to imagine my books being used. So I think that kind of, all of that kind of collides to ending up with the books that I have. You know, it's funny, I never choose, like, for example, for Other Words for Home, it didn't come about from thinking I'm going to write a book about the Syrian refugee crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And for The Shape of Thunder, it didn't start by saying I'm going to write a book about gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
My books always start with characters. And in that way, I also always hope that it's a story that asks the reader to kind of think about and engage with these issues, but doesn't feel like it's an issue that then a story has been like generated out of. So I think that is also like a big part of my process.
This really comes through in this book, in Other Words for Home, because you can tell it's about characters. It's not about, look at this awful thing the world has done to us. It's about how characters deal with the world and how these influences, whether it's the violence in Syria or whether it's the kind of mental and emotional violence that gets wreaked on immigrants in this country sometimes, that you feel that, and you feel it through the characters that are described, rather than than just, you know, here's this awful situation and here's some people we're using as cardboard cutouts to show it.
I just kept underlining. I wrote down notes as I was reading, and I wrote down perspective, and I just kept underlining perspective, because it was, you know, when they were in Syria, it was the perspective of, well, who's really kind of the good guy, or who's fighting against whom here. And then when they came back to the States, to Cincinnati, the perspective of within the school and her other students, and then the family even that they were staying with. And it all comes down to perspective. And you're right, Jasmine, the characters just totally come through to tell the story.
I have to say that there was one line that you use a couple of times in the book that just blew me away, and I don't know if it's truly an old saying from Syria or not, but when you said she cannot give what she does not have, talking about being able to love, being able to give of herself, and then also of the father in the family they're staying with, that hit me hard. Is that truly did you write that, or is that actually an old Syrian kind of epigraph?
So that's an Arabic proverb.
Okay.
And the thing about Arabic proverbs that's really interesting to me is, so I grew up hearing all of these all the time. My dad would say these, me growing up. And when I was younger, I, in lots of ways, early on started to feel complicated feelings about like my sort of hyphenated identity, and in lots of ways would just be like, Dad, please don't say this like weird Arabic proverb when we're in the car with my friends. And talk about this, like, I just want to be normal, or whatever normal meant, you know, this idea you have in your head when you're a kid. And then all these years later, while working on the book, texting my dad and being like, "Hey, you know that thing you used to say to me all the time when I was young, and I would yell at you? What is it again?" And I think there's also like a lot of the sayings themselves are really beautiful as they are in Arabic, but even in translation, the poetic nature of it, I think, really comes through, and that's a big part of the culture itself, which is a part of the reason I wrote even the book in verse, of wanting to like exalt and celebrate that part of the like cultural tradition of Arabic and things like that. And so these are real like proverbs, and they were sourced from my family, of being like, hey, these things you used to tell me when I was younger, and realizing again that even when you're young and you think something isn't resonating with you, it still oftentimes will like find its way like to get through those cracks and stay a while.
It's a Sondheim song. Children will listen.
Oh my goodness, yes, yeah.
So I'm going to break one of the things I said already, because what you just said made me remember the thing from Part 2, Chapter 13. Americans love labels. They help them know what to expect. Sometimes, though, I think labels stop them from thinking. Good stuff.
Yeah. You know, I think that it was really interesting for me because I don't have the experience, right, of being an immigrant, let alone a refugee. I was born here. And so in taking on Jude's character, I had to really put myself in the shoes of someone who would be experiencing America for the first time. And I think one of the things is that Jude was coming from a pretty homogeneous place. In her town in Syria, most everyone else was Arab, like her. And there wasn't a lot of religious diversity either. She was definitely in the majority, being a Sunni Muslim. And coming to America, she's going to experience a much more diverse society. And I think there's so much beauty in that in America, right? And that we are this like multi-ethnic country. But in that also, we constantly are struggling with how to grapple with that, right? And so I think we have lots of labels. And some of them are necessary, you know, and she says, you know, back in Syria, this is just food, and here it's Middle Eastern food. And obviously the reason for that, right, is that we have so many different types of cuisines here that are more usual to find. But I do also think that we are a culture that loves labels, and we love to have a label and then think that it means this exact thing. And I do think it stops us sometimes from thinking more deeply about the things that we've labeled. And so it was a book that I really wanted to engage with that nuance of it. I didn't want it to be a thing where everything is harder in America or everything is better in America, but more that it's different, and there's beauty in that difference, and there's also struggle in that difference. And I think that is one of those things of the ways that even the world is observed and reported on, and the language in which people do that is very different. And it's a cultural difference I've noticed just from engaging like with my cousins in the Middle East, that they don't have they don't sort things in the way that like is the norm for me to do, because I've been socialized here in America to do that.
Well, Jasmine Varga, thank you so much for being with us today. We're looking forward to welcome you via Zoom on Monday, July 12th, 3 o'clock. Is registration required for this program?
Yep, you do want to register in advance for this program. Jasmine's visiting as part of our summer edition of our middle school book club, and they are going to be talking about Other Words from Home and The Shape of Thunder, and it's going to be just a casual chat, almost just like we've had just today.
Well, thank you again for being here. Thank you for writing these books. They are just a real guide, a real way of really thinking with somebody else's brain for a while. I really enjoyed this. So thank you, Jasmine, very much.
Yeah, and congratulations on all the honors and awards. A Newbery Honor book, and again, the representative for Ohio at the Library of Congress National Book Festival. Congratulations.
It's just great. So
thank you. Thank you both so much. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I just wanted to mention Friends of the Library. We talked about this last week. We're going to talk about it again next week with Karen. But if you've been saving your books to give to the library, your weekends are coming. July 17th at the Orange Library from 10 until 1. And then on July 24th at the Orange Library, also from 10 to 1. Drive up, we'll unload them, we'll dump them into bins, we'll take them back to the garage, we'll get them ready for the next big book sale, and I'm sure Karen's going to talk about that. So just remember, Saturday the 17th from 10 to 1 at Orange, Saturday the 24th at Delaware from 10 to 1. be there, bring your books, and we'll be happy to take your donations. We'll also have slips so you can take the tax deduction if you want to, if you still can. So is there anything really quickly you want to say? Because we are almost out of time here.
I want to say thank you to Beanbag Books for the coupon for our Summer Reading Club 6-hour prize. This week I want to say thank you to Magic Nate for his on-demand magic video that he provided for us. Check it out, DelawareLibrary.org/summer reading. And if you haven't registered, tomorrow night, Saturday the 10th, we are having a Discord game night in the teen room on the Discord page. They're going to be playing things like Jackbox trivia or Jackbox games, and they're going to be doing all sorts of trivia games and other things like that. So get registered. Check out the online calendar. You don't want to miss. We've got a lot of fun stuff popping up.
Plenty of fun stuff for the summer at the library. So thank you very much. Thank you again, Jasmine Varga. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, as always, Gage.
Absolutely.
And many thanks to our friends at the library for sponsoring the show, and we will see you in the stacks.